The Sakhalin projects are offshore in moving ice zones, in areas that get high winds and variable weathers and changing sea currents. It's the most technically challenging operating environment in the world. And if it wasn't for Exxon and Shell leading up the Sakhalin 1 and the Sakhalin 2 projects, they would have never happened. In terms of dollars invested per oil back, they're the most expensive projects in the world. And bit by bit, over the last 20 years, the Russian state has forced Exxon and Shell to give up incremental percentages of ownership to the point that they're now minority holders, even though they are still the operators. The companies that they're partnered with, whether it's Gazprom or Rosneft or out of Japan, Mitsui and Mitsubishi, they have no idea how to operate these fields. So this week, Exxon and Shell both announced that they're walking away completely. They, like BP, know they will not get a single cent in recompense for these operations. And whereas BP can at least hand over the operations to Rosneft, for Rosneft to preside over its general decline, Exxon and Shell, because of the nature of the work here and the technical nature of the work, are going to shut it down completely. So we are looking here at about another 350,000 barrels of crude and about 3 BCF of natural gas that's going to vanish from the market in the first half of this year because the remaining players simply can't operate it, much less expand it. What we've got here is a crude quality chart. So the farther to the left you are, the thicker and heavier your crude. The farther to the right, the more it's like nail polish. More to the top, you're dealing with things that have very few contaminants. More to the bottom, you get crusty sulfur and mercury creeping into the system. Now, I've highlighted 3 things here. First of all, Urals is in the bottom right quadrant. It's a mild sour, mild heavy crude. The reason this matters is that it's all the same. The Russians blend they don't have a separate system for different crude blends. Everything gets put into the network. So when it comes out, it's just kind of this melange of everything. And this is roughly where it matches on there. Now, that means that refiners who have used Urals crude find it fairly reliable. Leaving aside the geopolitics for a moment, the Russian system has allowed refiners the world over to tune their system so that they are able to run the same thing. It's a reliability issue. Each crude is different, and you can make different crude-derived products with it. And if you can get the same crude that your refinery is tuned to, you're going to get much better throughput results. There we go. Wow, that was hard. Urals being the world's single largest crude grade by volume. A lot of people have tuned the refineries for it. And now that it is vanishing, they're going to have to figure out a different way to operate. There are other mild, sour, mild, heavy crudes. Most of them come out of Iraq and Iran, a little bit out of Saudi Arabia. So it's not like it's a death blow, but now you're looking at people trying to replace 5 million barrels of throughput with a different input stream, all at the same time. For comparison, up in the top left, you can see that the blues, those are U.S. shale crudes. Because U.S. shale is basically broken out of the rock and it's never had a chance to migrate through the rock formation and pick up contaminants, it's super light and super sweet. CPC blend out of Tengiz is very similar in that regard. So replacing CPC, that's no problem. The Americans have plenty. But replacing Urals, that's going to be a big issue. For the Europeans, this is where they get their diesel. So you're talking about immediate problems that are going to filter through the entirety of the European system, as this oil shortage has a very specific outcome for them, in addition to high prices, in addition to recessionary activity, but really, really snarling up their transport system in a short period of time. Now, normally you would respond to one provider going out of the market by bringing in another one. That's really not an option this time, and not just because of scale. This is total investment from all sources into all oil and all natural gas everywhere in the world since 2010. Now in 2014, 2015, a narrative took place, developed in Tokyo, in Paris, in London, and in Wall Street that fossil fuels were done. So why would you invest your money in fossil fuel production if you know that 10 years from now we're all going to be living in a green utopia? As a result, For years, energy investment dropped, and last year it was less than 60% of what it had been in 2014. The average turnaround time for bringing on a new oil project is 3 to 8 years. So even if we doubled oil investment today, we would not begin to see a repairing of global supply streams until at least 2025. So whatever prices manifest this year because of the Russian cutoffs, they've got legs. And because it's removing supply from the system, the amount of demand destruction that would have to occur to re-achieve some sort of market balance, you're talking about a global recession that would last at least a couple of years. And that assumes that the money is available. I would argue it's really not anymore. This is net worth in the United States, comparing 2016 to 2019. As you age, you get paid more, and once your kids move out, your expenses drop. So your net worth expands. And everyone's peak net worth happens the day before they retire. When they retire, the math changes. Your income stops. You liquidate a lot of your more prospective investments. You go into bonds and from stocks and bonds to T-bills and cash. Writ large, the world's baby boomers, not just in the United States, but the entire advanced world, on average, they retire either this year or next year. So at this moment, we do have a lot of free capital in the system. Good thing too. But a year from now, we won't. We are going from one of the most liberal and loose capital supply systems that we have ever known to one of the strictest in just the next 12 months. At the same time, we've got to figure out how to get by with a lot less energy. So the overall global picture for this is incredibly gloomy because there isn't enough money now. And we need high investment for a minimum of 3 years to try to mitigate what is happening right now. Now, of course, all fields are not created equal. If you would develop something in the deep of Siberia or in the deep offshore off of Angola, you're looking at more on that 8-year range. Whereas if you do something that's onshore, that's closer to a population center, you're probably looking at a 3-year range. But there's a whole nother category, and that's has to do with where everyone lives versus where the petroleum is. So this, as you all know, is one of my favorites, the checkbook map. Every dot is a population center. Here are the world's existing conventional oil and natural gas basins. A lot of the angst of globalization has been about making sure that the energy can make it from where it's produced, the green, to where people live, the dots. I'm going to click this and show you where the shale is. Now, again, green is where conventional is. Pay specific attention to the Arabian Peninsula and North America. In a nutshell, this is the shale revolution. As much as American midstreamers bitch about trying to get Texas crude up to New York, it's almost co-located compared to the global norms. The Europeans have been relying on 3,000 plus mile pipelines to bring Russian crude to market. Replacing that means going into different parts of the world and dealing with equally complicated systems. This is not something the United States needs to worry about, unfortunately, for the Europeans, because we're self-sufficient. Yeah, and I mean, let me rephrase that. Right now, if you include refined product, the United States is still a net exporter. The way the United States collects its energy data is different from every other country in the world. The way that the Energy Information Agency and the Department of Energy report it, they say that nobody consumes raw crude. They consume products, but that's not how production data is done. So it's a very apples and oranges issue. But if you're willing to kind of like push past that, the United States has been a significant net exporter even during COVID. And as shale has added incrementally more barrels to the system, that has only increased. So we're really looking at about a net export of about 3 million barrels today of refined product. The other little aspect when it comes to US shale is that the turnaround time for the wells is a lot shorter, and that shows up in pricing. So what we've got here is Henry Hub in the United States going back to the 90s. These are some really big hurricanes. We all remember what that feels like. It used to be that we got a significant percentage of our oil and gas from the Gulf offshore. So every time a hurricane would come through, prices would explode. But then we got to about 2009, 2010, and by then, shale was producing more than half of the natural gas that Americans used. And when that happened, the price smoothed out and stayed low. Not bad. If you're from Texas, this is your fault. That spike there is when it got cold in Texas last winter, and natural gas and oil and electricity and hydro and nuclear, it all failed on the same day. And as a result, we saw the price spike. And then here is where we are now. So when people are bitching about energy inflation in the United States, this is what we're bitching about. Well below the historical average. It's just that it's above the shale era average. Now, we are seeing more operating in American shale. It's incrementally increased throughout the winter, and we were very close pre-Ukraine to being back to what we were kind of expecting at sub $4 prices. I'm not sure we're going to get there, but I do think because it's easier, let me rephrase that. It takes 3 to 8 years to bring a conventional oil or natural gas field online. In shale, it only takes 3 to 8 weeks. Because the United States has a lot of legacy infrastructure for transport. Our population centers are close to where the production is. And the technology of it allows for a lot faster development because you're not going after a really huge spot that you can stick a straw in. There's no big pool in shale. You know you have to drill down. You know you have to drill horizontally. You know you have to frack. And we've now made that an industrial process. So 3 to 8 weeks for bringing new stuff online is really no problem. But you can't do that anywhere else. So this is our price structure, and here are the Europeans and the Asians. They're already dealing with with natural gas prices that are 4 to 7 times what they are here. And because it takes 3 to 8 years to develop new fields, and because the Russian stuff is going offline, you should expect this to, at a bare minimum, triple over the course of the next couple of months. And based on when attacks start happening on the infrastructure, it could be a lot sooner than that.